Lecture 8. This lecture will provide a comprehensive overview of the third stage of labor, which is the time between delivery of the infant and delivery of the placenta. Understanding how to manage the third stage of labor is essential for healthcare professionals involved in obstetric care so that maternal mortality will decrease. This lecture will review the third stage of labor, explaining the concept of active management of the third stage of labor. Common complications, including retained placenta and postpartum hemorrhage, will be reviewed along with the management of these complications. The third stage of labor is defined as the period following the birth of the baby until the delivery of the placenta. It is very important to actively manage the third stage of labor to ensure maternal safety and prevent complications such as postpartum hemorrhage. We will now review the objectives of active management of the third stage of labor. The primary objective is to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. By facilitating the timely delivery of the placenta and ensuring excellent uterine tone, we can significantly improve maternal outcomes by decreasing blood loss and risk of infection. The World Health Organization recommends active management of the third stage of labor for every delivery. Active management involves 3 parts: controlled cord traction, uterine massage, and administering uterotonic medication. With these interventions, postpartum hemorrhage is reduced by 60%. Administering a uterotonic medication is the part that contributes most to decreasing postpartum hemorrhage. Let's now look at a case presentation. You are caring for a 30-year-old gravida 2 para 1 mother who had a vaginal delivery of a healthy baby boy. Following delivery, the midwife was unable to deliver the placenta within 30 minutes. The patient has a retained placenta. Most placentas will deliver within 15 minutes from when the baby delivered. Though there's no clear consensus worldwide as to the ideal timing of placenta expulsion, but if the placenta remains in the uterus for 30 minutes after the delivery of the baby, it is called a retained placenta. Recognizing retained placenta is very important to reduce complications like bleeding and infection. Signs of placenta retention, including heavy vaginal bleeding, abdominal pain, or cramping postpartum, or signs of infection. The placenta is less likely to be retained if a uterotonic, such as oxytocin, is given routinely after delivery of the infant, and if controlled cord traction is used to assist delivery of the placenta. If the placenta does not deliver despite this, medical and surgical interventions may be required. Manual removal of the placenta may be necessary if spontaneous expulsion does not occur, and must be done right away if bleeding is heavy. Over the next few slides, we will discuss these management steps in detail. After prophylactic uterotonics have been administered, gentle cord traction can be used once there are signs the placenta is separating. These signs include a gush of blood and lengthening of the umbilical cord. Controlled cord traction is then used to facilitate the delivery of the placenta. While gentle traction is applied to the cord, the other hand must apply pressure upward on the uterus above the pubic bone. This minimizes the risk of uterine inversion. The patient should be in a supine position. Pulling too hard can cause uterine inversion, where the uterus turns inside out and comes out of the vagina, or can cause cord avulsion, meaning the umbilical cord tears off the placenta. Manual removal of the placenta is required whenever bleeding is heavy and the placenta has not delivered with controlled cord traction. Manual removal is also indicated if the placenta has not been expelled within 30 to 60 minutes following delivery of the infant. The right hand is introduced vaginally into the uterus and sweeps back and forth in the plane between the placenta and the uterine wall to separate the placenta. The other hand stabilizes the uterine fundus by gently pushing it toward the vagina. Manual removal of the placenta is an important procedure that requires proper preparation and awareness of the contraindications and the potential complications. Before the procedure, ensure the patient has adequate analgesia. Use a septic surgical technique. Be sure the patient has at least 1 IV in place. If it is not possible to feel a plane between the placenta and the wall of the uterus, consider abnormal placental attachment to the uterus called placenta accreta spectrum disorder. In this situation, do not continue to attempt manual removal, as this could worsen the bleeding. A hysterectomy may be required. The patient needs to be stabilized, as explained in the PPH section, while this is arranged. After the placenta is removed, you must monitor the patient for signs of complications such as infection or excessive bleeding. You should also educate the patient on what symptoms to look out for and report. We will now discuss postpartum hemorrhage, another potential complication of the third and fourth stages of labor. Postpartum hemorrhage, PPH, remains one of the most significant threats to maternal health. It is defined as excessive bleeding following childbirth. PPH is a potential complication of both vaginal and cesarean delivery. The traditional definition of PPH is 500 milliliters or more of blood loss at a vaginal delivery or 1,000 milliliters or more of blood loss at C-section. However, women entering labor with anemia or who are volume constricted, such as can occur with preeclampsia, can become hemodynamically unstable with smaller volumes of blood loss. Primary PPH occurs within 24 hours postpartum and is most often due to uterine atony, which means that the muscle of the uterus has not contracted well. Secondary PPH happens up to 6 weeks later and is most often due to infection or retained placenta or both. There are multiple risk factors for a PPH as listed here and include a previous history of PPH, uterine muscle exhaustion due to long or very short labor or use of oxytocin during labor, multiple pregnancies or other causes of an unusually large uterus, uterine infection, advanced maternal age and high number of past pregnancies, placental abnormalities like placenta previa, morbidly adherent placenta, and placenta abruption. Notably, about 40% of women who experience PPH have no identifiable risk factors. So, it is important to be ready to manage PPH at all deliveries. The causes of PPH are often summarized by the 4 T's. Understanding the 4 T's provides a framework for assessing and managing postpartum hemorrhage. The 4 T's include tone, tissue, tears, and thrombin. Tone refers to how contracted the uterine muscle is. Poor tone is called atony. An atonic uterus is prone to bleeding. Poor tone is the cause of 70% of cases of primary postpartum hemorrhage. Tissue refers to retained placenta tissue or retained amniotic membranes or retained clots. If the placenta and membranes are not completely removed, there can be heavy vaginal bleeding. Tears refers to perineal or vaginal or cervical tears that could be bleeding, as well as uterine rupture. Thrombin refers to a coagulopathy such as DIC that may be preventing the blood from clotting. WHO recommends the administration of uterotonics for the prevention of postpartum hemorrhage, PPH, during the third stage of labor for all births. This should occur with delivery of the baby's shoulders or within 1 minute after the birth of the baby. Oxytocin is the most commonly used agent and the uterotonic drug of choice to prevent PPH because of effectiveness, low cost, and low risk of side effects. Oxytocin can be administered either IM or IV. If administered IM, the dose is 10 international units. If administered IV, the dose is 3 international units. When there is ongoing bleeding or risk factors for PPH, oxytocin can also be administered in an infusion of 20 to 40 international units per liter at a rate of 7 to 15 international units per hour. To infuse this many units per hour, the IV should run at 750 to 375 milliliters per hour. Running the IV infusion more quickly than this will not be any more effective, so a second-line uterotonic should be given if the uterus has not contacted down well. Carbetocin is long-acting oxytocin. It can also be used as a first-line uterotonic. It is more commonly used at the time of C-section in a dose of 100 micrograms IV over 30 to 60 seconds. It is available in a heat-stable form. Second-line uterotonics include ergometrine, carboprost, and misoprostol. Because they more commonly cause side effects, they are usually given when oxytocin is not effective or available. Ergometrine, commonly called Ergot, is administered in a 250 microgram dose. IM Ergot is contraindicated in patients with hypertension. In some places, a medication containing ergometrine and oxytocin together, called sintimetrine, is available. Carboprost, commonly called Hemabate, is also administered in a 250 microgram dose. IM. It can also be injected intramyometrial, which means directly into the uterine muscle. Hemabate is contraindicated in patients with asthma. Misoprostol can be used as a second or third-line option. It works best if administered sublingually. Rectal dosing is not recommended to treat a postpartum hemorrhage because rectal absorption is much slower than sublingual, and therefore it takes much longer to work when given rectally. The recommended dose is 200 micrograms sublingually. Where oxytocin is unavailable or cannot be protected from heat, misoprostol can be used as the first-line drug for active management of the third stage of labor. A 33-year-old gravida 4 para 4 presented to the emergency department 3 hours after a quick, uncomplicated, spontaneous vaginal delivery. Membranes had ruptured just before delivery. She had a second-degree tear and delivered a healthy baby weighing 3,800 grams. However, she began experiencing heavy vaginal bleeding shortly after delivery. On examination, her blood pressure is 60/40, her heart rate is 118 beats per minute. Laboratory tests revealed she is anemic but with a normal white blood cell count and normal platelets. How do you manage this patient? Managing postpartum hemorrhage like the patient in case 2 involves medical and possibly surgical approaches. Managing postpartum hemorrhage requires a systematic approach that includes assessing airway, breathing, and circulation. You should activate the emergency response system by calling for help immediately. Notify the labor ward coordinator, obstetric registrar, and anesthetist. Assign roles within the team to ensure effective communication and management. Designate a scribe to document events and interventions. Initial treatment often focuses on resuscitating the patient by intravenous fluids and blood transfusion to stabilize her. Continuous monitoring of vital signs should be initiated, with frequent reassessments. While the ABC are being assessed and the emergency team is assembling, IV access should be established. You should insert 2 large-bore intravenous cannulas aiming for 18 gauge to facilitate rapid fluid resuscitation and blood transfusion. Next, you should administer a bolus of isotonic crystalloid solution such as normal saline or lactated ringers. For a postpartum hemorrhage, fluid should be administered in a 1:3 ratio. If the patient has lost 1 liter of blood, she should receive 3 liters of isotonic fluid. If the patient shows signs of significant blood loss or clinical shock such as hypotension and tachycardia, initiate blood transfusion protocols. Compressing the aorta can help lessen blood loss while other interventions are begun. Standing on the left side of the woman, the aorta is compressed. Pressing at the level of the umbilicus with the right fist while using the left hand to determine that femoral artery pulsation is no longer palpable, indicating successful compression. While IV access is established and fluids are being administered, you should assess the uterus. Start by inserting a Foley catheter to empty the bladder. A full bladder can make it difficult to palpate the uterus. It can also interfere with the uterus contraction and therefore make bleeding worse. Knowing urine output also guides fluid resuscitation. Next, perform bimanual uterine massage to stimulate uterine contractions. Remember that 70% of postpartum hemorrhages are caused by uterine atony. One hand should be placed internally in the vagina, while the other applies external pressure through the abdominal wall on the uterine fundus. This technique helps identify uterine atony as a cause of PPH. Bimanual compression of the uterus can significantly reduce bleeding. If bleeding persists despite massage, perform manual exploration of the uterus to rule out retained placenta or clots. This involves inserting fingers into the uterus, right up to the fundus to check for any retained placental fragments that could prevent proper contraction. If bleeding continues when the uterus is well contracted, conduct a thorough examination of the perineum, the vagina, and the cervix to identify any lacerations or tears that may be contributing to bleeding. This slide demonstrates bimanual massage and compression that was discussed previously. Bimanual compression involves applying pressure to the uterus through both internal and external means to stimulate contractions and control bleeding. One hand is inserted into the vagina to apply internal pressure on the uterus, while the other hand exerts external pressure on the fundus of the uterus through the abdominal wall. The goals are to compress blood vessels within the myometrium and promote uterine contraction and ultimately reduce bleeding. While resuscitative measures and exams have been started, administer medications to manage uterine tone. Oxytocin is usually given first, followed by ergometrine or carboprost, and misoprostol as needed. Infusing oxytocin at greater than the above rate will not improve outcome. If atony persists with this dose of oxytocin, ideally a second uterotonic medication is added. Tranexamic acid, TXA, is not a uterotonic but inhibits fibrinolysis and is frequently used in addition to uterotonic medications to promote clotting and reduce bleeding. TXA should be administered as 1 gram IV over 30 to 60 seconds as soon as possible after a PPH is diagnosed. It is not helpful if given more than 3 hours after onset of the PPH. Prompt administration can significantly improve outcomes for affected women. While administering uterotonics to promote uterine contraction, prepare for potential surgical interventions. While medical interventions such as uterotonics and bimanual massage are critical, procedures can play an essential role in controlling PPH and saving lives. Techniques such as intrauterine balloon tamponade and surgical options can be life-saving in severe cases. Intrauterine tamponade is indicated in cases of persistent bleeding after childbirth when atony has been confirmed as the cause of ongoing bleeding, retained tissue and tears have been ruled out or treated, and other treatments for the atony have failed. Tamponade may be effective on its own or as a management method prior to surgical intervention if surgery cannot be performed immediately or when transport is required. Inflating a balloon device inside the uterus can compress the uterine walls to stop bleeding. This may prevent the need for surgical interventions. The balloon is usually inflated with 250 to 500 milliliters of sterile saline or water. It can remain in place for 12 to 24 hours while monitoring for bleeding and uterine tone. Oxytocin must also be given, because some amount of uterine tone must be present for the balloon to be effective. A balloon manufactured for this purpose can be used. A glove or condom tied over the end of a straight urinary catheter has also been shown to be effective. These are illustrated in the next 2 slides. This shows how a glove is tied over the end of a bladder catheter using suture material. It is placed into the uterus and then inflated with sterile saline or water to press against the inner surface of the uterus and stop bleeding. This shows how a condom is used to create a balloon tamponade. With any type of balloon tamponade, uterotonic medication must continue to be used. Close ongoing monitoring of vital signs and urine output is very important. The patient may begin to bleed again when the balloon tamponade is removed, so this monitoring must be in a center where surgical treatment would be available. Some patients will continue to bleed despite the treatments already discussed. These patients will need to be taken for laparotomy and counseled that a hysterectomy may be the only way to stop their bleeding. At laparotomy, placement of compression sutures in the uterus may be a way to stop bleeding, which avoids a hysterectomy and preserves fertility. One technique for placing compression sutures, called B-Lynch sutures, is illustrated here. As seen in diagram C, tying the sutures compresses the uterus. This blocks flow through the vessels in the uterus to decrease bleeding. If conservative measures have failed, hysterectomy will be necessary. Some experienced surgeons may first try ligating the major vessels supplying the uterus, such as the uterine arteries. However, it is very important to not delay in carrying out a hysterectomy while the woman deteriorates hemodynamically or develops disseminated intravascular coagulation. Hysterectomy will also be necessary if there are significant anatomical issues like placenta accreta. In summary, skilled management of the 3rd stage of labor is crucial for improving maternal health outcomes. By using active management strategies and recognizing potential complications early, we can provide better care for mothers during childbirth. Continuous education in this area will enhance our skills as healthcare providers.